Kids in baseball were the focus of a press event at the Waldorf Astoria on Park Avenue, 4 blocks north of 270 Park, where Harry Frazee had lived and died. The second tan building on the right, that's the actual apartment building of Harry Frazee. And coming up on the left with an American flag, that of course is the Waldorf Astoria. The Waldorf event was held after Ruth was discharged from French Hospital. The event was held 20 days before Babe Ruth Day. Ruth had not yet started treatments at Memorial Hospital. He put on a brown checkered sports jacket and showed up at the Waldorf, his first public appearance in months. This is Ruth at the event with Ford executive Benson Ford, the grandson of Ford founder Henry Ford. The Ford Company was the lead sponsor of American Legion Baseball. There were more than 5,800 American Legion teams at that time. Here's Ruth on stage at the Waldorf event. Ruth had been introduced as a new consultant with a lifetime contract. Ruth said at the event, "I feel fine, but weak as hell. For the first time in my life, I feel that I have a chance to put a lot of my ideas into action. You know how I've always felt about kids playing baseball. I love them. And that's why I went as far as I did in baseball. They didn't swing the bat for me, but they helped." 7 years old until he became a minor league player, Ruth had attended a Catholic boys' school known as an orphanage. Ruth wasn't an orphan, but was put there by his working class parents who couldn't stop him from getting into trouble. At the school, Ruth fell in love with baseball. Yes, that's Ruth in the center in the back row. Here's Ruth at the Waldorf event at age 52. United Press's Oscar Fraley was at that event, and he wrote the day later, "They say time and tide wait for no man, but as weak as he is, the idol is trying to do something for American boyhood before the clock and the current run out." Ruth may have never known again that he had cancer. The media reported that he had major throat surgery, but not cancer. His widow, Claire, would write that Ruth was never told he had cancer, even by doctors. Some suggest that Ruth did find out after Babe Ruth Day when he was at Memorial Hospital. Now, after baseball commissioner Chandler had announced Babe Ruth Day, he hoped to convince Ruth to participate in ceremonies at Yankee Stadium on the day of that national event. With Ruth's American Legion connection, Ruth agreed he would participate if the event was about boys, about inspiring a new generation of players to take the torch from Ruth. But baseball, Ruth, and the American Legion wanted one person from the new generation to represent the program's many players. They needed a symbol for the future of baseball, someone who had skills to possibly become the next Babe Ruth. Baseball picked this boy. In a United Press preview story about Babe Ruth Day, published the morning of that day, Cornelius Ryan called Cutler, quote, 13-year-old Larry Cutler, New York boy who made the American Legion All-American Boys team. The morning of the event, Larry was preparing for his speech at his home at Grand Concourse in the Bronx at about 145th Street, not too far from Yankee Stadium. He was a student at Bronx's Taft High School. Around the same time, Ruth was at his apartment at Manhattan's Upper West Side. Now here's that home. This was actually shot during a New York Sports Tours visit this month. This is Riverside Drive near the Hudson River. And here is Ruth with his wife Claire about to leave that same apartment building on Babe Ruth Day for the drive to Yankee Stadium. The Lincoln automobile was a gift from Ford, the American Legion sponsor. He took a seat in that car before he departed. Now, Jackie Robinson that morning was headed to this address. It was actually shot last week on a New York Sports Tours private outing. As noted earlier, history is often hidden. Let's see what's at the end of this walkway. The location, home plate of the Brooklyn Dodgers home, Ebbets Field. The Dodgers played their last season there in 1957, then moved to Los Angeles. Now, on Babe Ruth Day in 1947, Robinson would be playing his 9th game in the major leagues. Let's take a look at Jackie in action at Ebbets Field. Now, the Yankee Stadium audio feed of Babe Ruth being introduced and Babe Ruth's speech were broadcast to the Ebbets Field crowd. The speeches also went out to an international mutual broadcasting audience into ballparks, all ballparks where major league and minor league games were played that day. 2 weeks before Babe Ruth Day, Leo DeRocher, remember, of Nice Guys Finish Last fame, was on the cover of Time magazine. He was in the news because in early April, he had been suspended from the sport for a year by baseball commissioner Happy Chandler. Chandler, former U.S. Senator from Kentucky, was baseball's second commissioner. He didn't like that DeRocher had been seen in the company of gambling types and other behavior most considered less severe. There were also rumors that before the suspension, the Yankees were flirting with DeRocher to manage the Yankees. DeRocher, known for many on-field arguments with umpires, was nicknamed the Lip. It was Babe Ruth who had given him that nickname. Now here's Babe Ruth coming into Yankee Stadium with his wife on Babe Ruth Day. Babe was wearing a camel-haired coat and matching caps. AP's Jack Hand reported the next day in his review of Babe Ruth Day that a portion of Ruth's speech was directed at young Larry Cutler. And proclaimed Larry's speech was, quote, a popular keynote, unquote. The story claims that Larry was 14. Larry was not 13 or 14, he was 15. Here's a long shot of the Babe Ruth Day field ceremony. Parks in Japan were among the places where Cutler's introduction and Ruth's speech were broadcast. In addition, each pro player in Japan who homered on Babe Ruth Day was given 1,000 yen. New York Sports Tours recently uncovered, as previously mentioned, an unused reel of film from Babe Ruth Day of outtakes taken from 2 camera angles. We then tracked down Larry Cutler in Colorado. As noted, Larry has never seen a film recording of his speech. Just a couple minutes, he will for the first time. And I see Larry there. Thanks for joining us. Among those in the Yankee lineup on Babe Ruth Day were Joe DiMaggio, Yogi Berra, and, as you'll hear later, a young infielder named Bobby Brown. In 1947, that same year, yes, he's with a microscope because he was also studying to become a medical doctor. He made an impression on Larry Cutler that day. The speeches took place near home plate. Mutual Broadcasting Radio was airing the audio of the ceremony nationwide. Now, Mel Allen was the radio voice of the Yankees. He was the master of ceremonies. Sensing that the baseball commissioner would be booed in the Bronx, he asked the crowd to please be nice. Here is the beginning of Allen's plea from our reel.
Every ballpark where games are being played today will be hearing them. Now, no one listening wants anything but the best for the man we're honoring today.
The commissioner took the field, but despite Mel Allen's request, the Bronx cheers would come. By the way, that's a radio technician next to Mel Allen trying to get the crowd to stop booing. You'll see more of him being a bit animated in the background during the ceremony. Here's some of our film of Chandler after he was introduced. This is film that we're still restoring.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered in the baseball parks and on the playing fields of America today to pay tribute to and to say a prayer for an American boy who learned to play honestly and fairly the national game of his people and became a national hero. God grant that this resource may always remain with us, and that the spirit of baseball, the spirit of Babe Ruth, and the spirit of God may be with us always as we build a new generation of young Americans, humble in the sight of God and fully capable of protecting our heritage as a free people.
And the booze came again. Chandler did come back to the microphone again because he decided that he wanted to introduce Larry Cutler, maybe sensing that he would finally get some cheers because he was introducing young baseball star Larry Cutler. Larry would then introduce Babe Ruth. Next, you will hear and see the commissioner introduce Larry, and then the full speech of Larry introducing Babe Ruth. Larry and everyone else, we hope you enjoy this New York Sports Tours exclusive.
This is Albert B. Chandler. At this time, I would like to introduce a boy who will be under the leadership of Babe Ruth when Babe takes over his new job as Director of Baseball for the American Legion. Representing the boys of the American Legion, speaking for every American boy, ladies and gentlemen, here is Larry Cutler.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. I guess there are thousands of 13-year-old fellows like myself in this country who have heard about Babe Ruth ever since the first time they learned there was such a game as baseball. It's a great honor to be here, just to be able to tell Babe Ruth how proud we are to have him back in baseball, back where he belongs. And to know that Babe Ruth is going to be with us, kids, well, that's the biggest and best thing that could happen in baseball. From all of us kids, Babe, it's swell to have you back.
Here's Larry clapping on the right and the Babe waving to the crowd on the left when Babe came to the microphone. Now, here's an exclusive look at Babe Ruth's full speech. There have been excerpts out there, but this is his full speech that followed Larry's introduction. Enjoy.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You know how bad my voice sounds. Well, it feels just as bad. You know this baseball game of ours comes up from the youth. That means the boys. And after you're a boy and grow up to know how to play ball, then you come to the boys you see representing themselves today in your national pastime. The only real game, I think, in the world, baseball. As a rule, some people think if you give them a football or a baseball or something like that, naturally, they're athletes right away. But you can't do that in baseball. You gotta start from way down the bottom when you're 6 or 7 years of age. You can't wait until you're 15 or 16. You gotta let it grow up with you. And if you're successful and you try hard enough, you're bound to come out on top, just like these boys have come to the top now. There's been so many lovely things said about me, and I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to thank everybody. Thank you.
Give him away,
And yes, that's Larry Cutler on the screen as Babe Ruth walks off the field and into history. That's our virtual tour, but we're not done yet. It's my utmost pleasure to introduce and to welcome New York Sports Tour's leader and founder, Jordan Spreckman. I think a lot of people on board know and have heard of Jordan. He has many roles in New York sports, including as an official scorer for Major League Baseball for the New York Yankees and the New York Mets. He also happens to be a member of the New York chapter of the Baseball Writers Association of America, which means that he is among the voters who determine the players selected into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. And by the way, as Jordan comes on, if he sounds familiar, it's because he was the one who narrated the mini documentary about Harry Frazee. Again, my pleasure to introduce Jordan Spreckman.
Ali, thank you for putting that together, because that is fascinating, and it's also a great synopsis of not only the life of Babe Ruth, but also what he has meant to American history, not just sports history, but American history generally. I mean, he touches so many aspects of American culture. And you mentioned earlier, that Babe Ruth Day, the first Babe Ruth Day, because there was a second Babe Ruth Day in 1948, was a famous photograph of him in uniform with his back to the cameras, taken by a guy named Nat Fine, with the number 3 on his back, looking alone at Yankee Stadium. Yeah, so that was the second Babe Ruth Day, but this was the first one. That was 73 years ago. And it's hard to imagine that we're able to have here on the tour with us today 2 people who were even at Babe Ruth Day. There are something like 58,000 people at Yankee Stadium. 2 of those people are with us on our tour today. One of them, as Kevin has alluded to, is Larry Cutler. Larry, we're going to get to you. Larry's sitting with his son Davey at Davey's home in Colorado, in Denver. And when we get to Larry, we'll get to Larry in just one second. But first, I would like to introduce a longtime friend of mine, longtime friend of New York Sports Tours, sports editor of the New York Times for a dozen years, who attended Babe Ruth Day. It was the first time he was ever in Yankee Stadium. His name's Neil Amder. Neil, if you could come on the screen and say hi to everybody, because I have a question for you. I'm sure others may have a question for you too, which is, Neil, you drove all the way from Wilkes-Barre well, you didn't drive yourself because you were 7 years old. Somebody else was driving. What do you remember about going to Babe Ruth Day that day? How did you get there? What did you think?
I just remember how very special and with great anticipation I was looking forward to that day. And going with my father and a group of other gentlemen, it was the aura of the occasion of going to Yankee Stadium for the first time, of being down there, coming from a small town into New York, and being in the presence of an iconic figure like Babe Ruth. And for someone like myself, this was so special, and seeing him on the field in that camel hair coat and realizing that this was how special and the aura of it, it just left me with so many different impressions that stayed with me for most of my life.
And Babe Ruth is one. There are probably, you can pick them out, a half dozen athletes. I won't even start naming them to start getting into controversy. You didn't necessarily grow up a Yankees fan, but I have a feeling that whether you're a Yankees fan or not a Yankees fan, everybody's a Babe Ruth fan. Can you talk a little bit about, and having sat in the seat that you've sat in as sports editor of the New York Times, you've seen a lot of athletes come along. Can you talk a little bit, we talked a little bit about on the tour, what do you think Babe Ruth means even today, 72 years after his death, to to America and American culture?
I think it's safe to say that his place as an iconic figure in American sports is relatively secure. And what I think, maybe it's because he might have been the first of what we would call superstars or superheroes. And at a time when this country was evolving, I think people tended to look at him in larger than life circumstances. And I think what it was that he also delivered. And I think when you think that a stadium that was kind of almost bears his name, when you think of what he achieved along the way on so many different levels, whether it was winning titles, whether it was home run records. You have to imagine that his presence and just the fact that he was a big guy to begin with, and he always sort of measured up to that expectation that the public had for him. And even in the face of what was coming on as a depression and other things that would come and confront the country, Babe remained that figure in a sport that was national and was at that time just emerging as the national pastime. So I think it cemented him in that way.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, and I think coming right out of World War I, birth of radio, golden age of sports, all of those things, he was, I think, a man at the right time to turn into the type of person that he turned out to be.
And he delivered on so many different ways that not many people, maybe today it gets a little cynical when people look at athletes and their levels of expectations are so much higher with social media. But when you stop and realize that what he was as an international figure at a time when there wasn't social media, that it was baseball and what was happening at the time, I think the aura of it left me with such a strong impression. And you're right, while 10 years later, when I went back to Yankee Stadium to be in the junior sportscasters contest for the Yankees that they had at the time, I was still living with Babe Ruth 10 years earlier as a kid. So those are the kinds of things that you remember, and they stay with you your entire life.
Well, thank you, Neil, and thank you for joining us today. And now, ladies and gentlemen on the phone, we have the man behind the microphone. Or in front of the microphone, I guess, behind the microphone, Larry Cutler. Larry Cutler, the 15-year-old who was being passed off as a 13-year-old, representing the American Legion, I don't know of anybody else alive who actually introduced anybody else alive today who actually introduced Babe Ruth to do anything. So I think it's a real treat to have Larry on today. Larry, welcome and thank you.
Babe Ruth picking me to represent American Legion Bowl was absolutely fantastic. In fact, if I would have known that, I played 3 years pro ball and I had a pretty good record I didn't have power, but I had a pretty good record and I could have kept going. I was told I kept going. I let the contract for my 4th year, I sent it back and I didn't go. But if I knew that Babe Ruth had been the one who, how could I not go?
So let me ask you, Larry, how did you come to be chosen?
That's a good point. There was my semi-pro manager, he knew the Yankees. I don't know who's Mel Allen. Now I'm finding out Mel Allen was there. He was there. I don't know. And then there was somebody making the thing so that the voice would come out. Who did it? Well, it was people within the American Legion. And it was people, I don't know, they didn't other than that, because the Babe said it was about American Legion Ball, but there was all kinds of leagues. And I was in all kinds of leagues, although American Legion point, at that particular point, I was part of it. Then you go on to some other things, are higher. So it's absolutely unbelievable. Then to talk about the Babe, there was not just one great player when he started playing. There was many. There was Honus Wagner. There was Cy Cobb. There was Tris Speaker. There was many. But when you look at the Babe, he hit every year. He would hit 50 or 60 home runs, except for the one year that he was sick or whatever. And he kept that going for over 10 years, to say nothing of the fact he going forever. And if you look at the home run hitters that are going on now, who may have a few more home runs, like 6 less games a year compared to the others. They get this 162 games a year, and he was doing it, that kind of thing, in less games. Say nothing of that fact that he was the greatest. He was a great pitcher. He was a Hall of Famer as a pitcher.
Right. He spent the first 5 years of his career principally as a pitcher and was arguably the best left-handed pitcher in the American League.
Even it, the guy also was humility. He was humble. He loved kids. He tried to help people. He started off as a tough kid, and he had his ups and downs. But with all that, so that's why he's the greatest of all of them. There might others that, they did it. The first year he did it, from 1920 to 1930, there was about 2 or 3 other homers, Gehrig or something, that were near that kind of home run. But that was it. Oh, there's another thing. He wanted to be a manager. They wouldn't let him be a manager. Can you imagine how he would have taught the players? I mean, they weren't going to be Babe Ruth.
Well, he wouldn't have taught him about launch angle, that's for sure. Let me ask you this. You didn't actually speak to the Babe that day, but you did speak to another one of the Yankees players, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Bobby Brown. He was, before the game started, and I'm walking from one side saying I might have spoken already, or I was going to speak. And then there's a whole dugout. There's the Yankees on one side, and then there's the Washington Senators on the other side. And as I went by, Bobby Brown started talking. He says, "Good luck, kid." He was a nice guy. I knew he was a good hitter. They used to say, well, maybe his fielding wasn't that good, but the guy, here's my son here, say, hey, take it easy. He was just a great guy. He became what he became as a doctor, much more than a specialist. And he felt for people. He was probably a very good doctor.
Yes, Bobby Brown became a cardiologist, later president of the American League, and is actually still alive and living either in or right outside Dallas, Texas.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Does anybody else have questions for Larry?
Yes, Jordan, this is Kevin. I am reading a couple, and one is from Mark from 1010 Wins. What do you remember? Maybe you've covered a little bit of this. What do you remember about the process, this is to Larry, of being chosen to introduce Babe Ruth that day? There was a scout, right?
Yeah. Oh, Paul Ritchell. Ritchell was a scout. He's the one that signed Gehrig. And I know that my manager and Sandlot Ball would talk with Ritchell. And I was a very good fielder. I had hands like Rizzuto. I was told that in the minor leagues too. I could do those kind of things. And but they never signed me to the Yankees, and they have their reasons, and they're probably good reasons. But he was a pretty good scout, Ritchell. You're talking about scouts now, right? The Yankee scouts, or but
what you remember about getting selected that day? I mean, obviously you played American Legion and ball, and you lived in the Bronx. You lived a stone's throw from the ballpark, so that probably had something to do.
I knew in high school. I mean, I was a 400 hitter. I was a very good fielder, so I thought I was pretty good. Whether I was as good as some of those other guys, probably not, because some of them went. And they have great scouting staff, the Yankees. Critchell signed, he signed, what's his name, Gehrig. I'm sure he signed many others, and he was a ball player himself, of course. And your question...
Critchell had something to do, if I remember, he had something to do with putting in a word for you because of he knew some people who had seen you. And I think that really carried some weight as far as I understand.
I would agree that. I definitely agree with that because he was great best scouts in Major League Baseball. and he proved it by whom he signed. He didn't a lot of other people. Well, that's another. I'm so glad I'm here because I'm finding out things about me. Maybe I was better than I thought I was. Because people say nice things, and that was the Yankees.
Larry, let me ask you one last question.
Oh, sure.
As you're watching that, you had not seen that speech in 73 years, right?
No, didn't see it.
What are you thinking as you're watching that speech? Does that look like somebody else, or does that look like and sound like you in your mind?
It sounds like me, and I saw it. And my son had it had it in audio. So I heard that a couple of years ago, and I said, "Hey, this is pretty good. This is pretty good." But it was not, in a sense, as focused on the fact, hey, I was a pretty good ball player, and so some managers thought I.
Well, you did go on to play minor.
That I left it. But you have different choices to make.
Go on to play minor league ball, which is, playing professional baseball is not an easy thing to do, of course.
I have 297 hitter for 3 years in pro ball. They were still asking me to come back. I wasn't a home run hitter, but I was a field. Aaron Rodgers told me I had hands like Rizzuto's, and I was I played very hard. I was known as a very good hustler. I was known for that in pro ball. Scouts said that, and people I played with, and they had nicknames for me. I'm talking too much. I know he's in 1955. Larry Cutler, they called him. I had a special nickname for me. Things like that, because we won. We were in last place when I got there, and then we won 12 straight, and we won the pennant and the World Series and the whatever. I'm bragging too much because I guess baseball players do that, and that's wrong because this is Babe Ruth, and this project which I've been called to help or be part of. If I'd have been in that same situation, there's no way I think that I could not go to the Pittsburgh for the next year.
That's right. You were with the White Sox organization and the Pirates. Hey, Larry, we don't want to keep you longer. You've been doing, yeoman's work here by joining us. We can't thank you enough. Jordan, I don't know if you have any parting words, but, kudos to Larry.
I have 2 parting words. That is, thank you to all of you who called in today. I hope you had a good time. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you learned something. So thank you very much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you again in the near future.
Thank you very much.